So, starting the stream. YouTube is plugging itself in. I can see something happening. Something is happening, and we are live on a Friday night at 7:30 for the live stream. Ladies and gents, welcome to episode 85 of Thompsin and Other Disappointments. Special shouts to the Patreon backers who are funding the embryonic stages of my cult of Bimfluencers, my terror group of tawdry talkery, if you will. That's Kerry, Paul, and Julian. I honestly value your support more than the vacuous, barely present enthusiasm of my blood relatives when I tell them about my podcast. So thank you very much. Put simply, you rock my world. Just a quick note regarding that Patreon page. All episodes go on there first, so if you want to snap them up ASAP, in the brief window of time that they can still claim to be relevant, then that's where they'll be. And then 2 days later, they go out onto Spotify and Apple Podcasts and probably a bunch of other places that I don't even know about. If you cannot support via Patreon, totally understand that. It is a weird time for everyone. All I would ask is that if you've listened to 2 or 3 shows or read the blogs, all of it's on Funk27. If you have enjoyed it a couple of times, maybe ping an episode that you liked to a friend who you think might also enjoy it. That's all I ask. That's it. That's the pitch. My guest tonight. Sometimes I get shit for getting too many people of a similar mindset on. Guys, and you know, I have a lot of lefties on, lots of progressives, lots of idealism and musings that sit comfortably left of centre. It is good to talk with other people, though, people from different walks of life and who have different experiences and different values and sensibilities and so on. With that in mind, I was really drawn to my guest tonight. He's on TikTok. He's a money guy. He's a property investor. He and I don't agree necessarily on everything politically, but he seems like a lovely chap, and I'm really excited to have an hour of his time and to pick his brain about a few topics. So please welcome to the stage. Welcome to the stage. It's because we were talking about comedy a minute ago. Welcome to the show. Sorry, my guest tonight.
Am I going to run around and start waving and stuff and high fiving? This is going to be embarrassing because we've just been waiting all the cameras up here.
It's already embarrassing. Welcome to the show, Graham David.
Do you know what? I didn't even notice you. Sorry, Graham David. Yeah, that's me. I didn't even notice you're Thompsin and Other Disappointments. Are you? I've only just picked up on that the last 5-10 minutes. I love that name. That's amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, it's the result of a Twitter poll about a year and a half ago. I was like, if I were to start a podcast, what's the sort of... I want it to have a funny name because everyone's show is just called like the Paul Adams Show, you know, like it's got to be something a bit self-deprecating, I think.
Yeah, I absolutely get you, and I think these things are always tweaking and changing and altering to get better, aren't they? And because I had a rubbish title for ages. And I kept sort of altering it and changing it, and then
you mean Graham?
Yeah, that is what it is, right? But maybe I don't know. 2-3 months ago, I saw something. It might have been TikTok. It might have been somebody else, and they just said more money, and I thought, oh yeah, that's it. That's clearer. That's simpler. I can do that. Graham, more money. Yeah, that makes sense. So yeah, that's what I ended up with.
I like it. It's sort of, you know, it does what it says on the tin, right?
If you
subscribe to something called More Money, there's no ambiguity there. That's what you're looking for.
Well, I think so, but you know, it's not just money. I mean, it's you know, we try and talk a bit about property, and we talk about saving money, making money. We talk about property because people always want to know about property. And the other thing I'm really keen on is because there are so many people promising these instant, quick, get rich scams. There always have been, by the way. These people are always around, but it's actually. There are things that work, there's stuff you can do to do a little bit better, and for me, a lot of them are actually quite simple. There is no secret button you can press. There's no turn your computer into an ATM 24 hours a day. Yeah, that's some crap course they're trying to sell you. But there are little things you can do, and that's kind of what it is. And then, of course, there's bits of comedy we throw in there, allegedly, and various other things, Socialist Steve and other little things we drop in.
Yeah, you got to make it entertaining. Otherwise, you're just a guy in front of a webcam, monotonously boring your audience. I mean, I've tried to move away from that and make my own content somewhat entertaining. Let's talk a bit about your background, Graham, because you know, I know you from TikTok, and a lot of your content, money-wise, is really engaging, and I find your Socialist Steve stuff really funny. But let's talk. Let's sort of spool back a little bit and talk about how you got into how did you become a money guy?
Well, I'm probably not a money guy in terms of some of the money guys you see, but my background's in drama and theatre, right? That's what I studied. That's what I wanted to do. And then I spent most of my 20s flat broke. And I did the most awful succession of jobs. Like many of us, we've all done rubbish jobs. I think my low point, I was a blue fluffy shark for a few months.
That's the low point? That sounds like
that's the low point. £3.50 an hour I got for that.
Yeah.
It's a grim job. Anyway, so I all these various jobs, but I had this sort of vague plan of something to do with performance and drama. And I ended up... I was a lecturer for a little while, but I ended up becoming a trainer, as in a corporate trainer. And when you start doing stuff like that, you work with a lot of very good people. You work with a lot of not so good people, but you see a lot of big organizations, and you start to work out stuff that's working. And then, of course, you're working a lot of companies, and you work with a lot of managers and leaders. And off the back of that, I started looking at property. And off the back of that, of course, you're trying to think, well, how can I get a bit of an internet profile? And really, when I started doing stuff on TikTok 2 years ago, I did what I guess most people do, except the really together sorted ones. I don't know how you started, but I came on and did what everybody else did. So I did the dances.
Oh, right.
Which are still there.
Can't imagine you twerking, but yeah.
Yeah, it's embarrassing. So 2,500 videos ago, and I did all the whatever the lip syncing was, and I just did one video about here's a way you can present more confidently on camera, and all of a sudden the figures shot up, and it's like, oh, okay, here's the thing I do to try and save £5 a week, and it's people like, oh, that's interesting, and that was all it was, and it was just like, I guess common sense, but trying to bring a degree of honesty to it. So I've made loads of mistakes, like we all have, and I noticed that the money guys often never do apparently make mistakes.
Yeah.
So it was my start, I guess, was can I share some stuff with you that's honest, that really works, and actually let's be honest about it. If it's a good idea or not a good idea, but I'll tell you, I'll be honest about it. And that was it. Really. That was the idea.
I had a very similar experience where. When I first went on TikTok, I was way ahead of the curve. I downloaded it when I first heard about it because I used to be on Vine, which was an app that was out, I guess, about 10 or 12 years ago now. Like short 6-second videos, and like loads of people did comedy. Like it's quite challenging to make something funny in 6 seconds. And it was loads of fun, and I met some friends on it and stuff, and then it died. Like Twitter bought it, they didn't know what the fuck to do with it, and then it was just wound down. And so there was this. I don't want to suggest that there was this hole in my life that I was desperate to fill, but when I found out about this new app called TikTok that was video based, and there was a time limit on it, I was like, oh well, fucking great, I'll jump on that then. And I did like the same stuff as I was doing on Vine, just shit little jokes, tiny mini sketches. And whereas Vine was really difficult to build a following, TikTok, I did like maybe 1 in 20 or 1 in 30 caught fire, and it would get like 20,000 views or 50,000 views and a shit ton of I was like, wow.
So when was this, Aid? When were you doing this?
This must have been about 3 or 4 years ago. I remember because I was in Malta on holiday, and I was doing one there on the balcony, and then I deleted the app for ages and ages, because I just thought, well, it's not. Is it worth my time for like 1 in 20 or 1 in 30 videos?
So where did your numbers go in those first few weeks, months? Then do you remember?
I did one about how. There was one joke about how I call myself the librarian, because when I join the chat, like the WhatsApp chat, like it's free flowing, but then when I join it and say something, it shuts the chat that like everyone goes quiet, and it's like a librarian, going like telling everyone to shut up.
Yeah, I've got it.
And that like blew up. I was like, oh, cool, okay. And then, like, I guess that was about 20,000 or 50,000 views, which for an account that had like 30 followers on it was pretty good. But a lot, like a huge chunk, the majority by a huge margin, sank without trace. And it was only, so you said about like when you did a money tip, then it sort of caught fire. It was only when I randomly did a video. I think I was taking the piss out of like Meghan and Prince Harry or the Queen or something. It was something royal related, and it fucking like, I was like, whoa, okay. And then the next day I did a video about Brexit. I thought, oh, right, okay, I found my thing now. If I just keep talking politics, like news stuff, then people seem to like it. I don't know. Maybe I should have done money tips too. I would have got less hassle on Twitter.
Well, it's I found 2.5 years ago, I was kind of grumpy old, I don't to the point in social media, right? And then I started doing LinkedIn probably 2019, so just before the pandemic.
Yeah.
It's middle of 2019, and I started really working. I was posting 5 times a day and started growing my following, started actually getting business inquiries. And it was one of those moments of, I've been so stupid, because I was one of the first people to get adopted into LinkedIn.
Right.
And like most people on LinkedIn, I then did nothing with it for 10 years except posted anodyne. If you want to see the rainbow, you got to have the rain kind of nonsense. So, that kind of stuff. And you do the first couple and you get 30 views. You think, oh, I'll do another one. And eventually you hook it up, and then these things are just being churned out. Anyway, so I kind of got it. And then I'd seen TikTok, and I was still very much in the mind of it. Well, it's a thing for kids. I don't get it. I don't understand it. And then in 2 years ago, pretty much this month, I started using it. And it was the pandemic had just kicked off. All of my business had switched to online. So I now work from a studio. I used to go all over the UK or Europe, everywhere. And it's like, well, how am I going to make this work? And I've got to understand this online thing. And my first month, I still remember, I got 100 followers. I remember thinking, doing all right. And my second month, I got 12,500 followers. Yeah. And I thought, I've now solved it. And of course you haven't, because 3 weeks ago, I had a weekend when literally every hour, about 100, 200 new followers are joining. And I think in the last 2 weeks, I've gained 30 followers. Yeah. Now, they're all brilliant followers, and I appreciate them all massively, but it's so difficult to get a reliable understanding of how the channel grows. Yeah,
but at least with like money content, you could, like, it's kind of timeless, unless you're talking about like a defunct technology that, this is how you save money on your fax bill. But it's people are always going to want to save money, and things like parking tickets and the council tax bill or whatever is kind of timeless. And
the thing is, once you've started, of course, new stuff starts. So I started talking about whatever it was, and somebody said, do you do anything about renting property? Well, I do actually. So I'm in a couple of videos which really exploded, and then they attracted a whole new raft of very lefty people who don't really appear to like my stuff very much. But did they jump on you because you're because you do property investment? Are you a buy-to-let guy, or? Yeah, I'm a buy-to-let guy. Yeah. So I started buy-to-let in 2004. Okay. And like most people who've ever tried buy-to-let, I've made so many mistakes. Yeah. But that's part and parcel of it. And there are so many people still trying to sell expensive buy-to-let courses. And there's me and a couple of people on TikTok, and one of them's a very prolific investor. One of them's a mortgage guy. And we've all had these kind of off conversations. We said, how easy is it to invest? And we've all kind of gone, it's pretty easy, actually. You just do this. It's a thing you can explain in half an hour. Most people can understand most of it in an hour. And yet there are still these really dodgy property mentoring companies. It's £20,000 a year. Yeah. It's an utter scam. Yeah. It's horrible.
There's one guy, isn't there? I don't want to sort of whatever the word is, like libel or slander. No. But there's one guy on, I think he runs a YouTube channel, and I saw another guy doing an expose on him, and he had sort of like looked into the so let's call the first guy Shane and the second guy is Paul, right? And so Paul starts looking into Shane's like business dealings and his limited company and where because when you run it, like some people who listen to this or are watching the YouTube might not know that when you run these limited companies, you have to publish how much money you've made, right? And how much money you've lost. And this guy, say Paul, who was investigating Shane, could not find any record of this guy having made the amount of money that he was claiming to have made on his YouTube videos. Like, I've made £5 million, I've made 10. If you want to do it too, just sign up to my 20 grand course. Like, it's such a scam.
Well, I think the problem is, if you look at people like that, not any specific individual, what they all sell is what they're selling essentially works. But the bit that they have to do to justify the prices, it's all about a big funnel. So you're going to get 300 people into a big room in the NEC or in a hotel in London. You've got to get them all there, and you've got to get them all hyped up. Now, this typically starts over 2 days, and they all use the Anthony Robbins model, which is you're going to start with 200, 300, 400 people. None of them have paid to be there. And then what you do is you get them to yes and cheers, and you get them to sort of comply with various things. So you're going to tell them you've got to be hyped up, you've got to be positive, you've got to get into the mindset. Now, there's an element of that that's true, but the reality of why you're doing it is you're getting them to comply with your requests. And the more you get people to do that, it's a little bit like when you go fishing for scam and spam emails. The fact that people go, yeah, you're just nudging them along a little line. Are they going to agree to the later thing? And then typically they all follow exactly the same route. The first speaker will come out, they'll tell you a story that's quite high, then they'll have a crashing personal disaster. This happened to their mother, this happened to their job, this happened to their partner. And then they will start to say how property helps them. They took their first few steps. Right. And you'll see the sun coming up over the darkness of their terrible life at that stage. And now they've got 300 properties and they never have to work another day. And at this point, so the argument goes, you are most susceptible to the purchase. And they will start with, there's a book you can buy, it's 20 quid. You can buy all the books for 100 quid. Back of the room, go and buy now. And they start with little test purchases. And as each speaker comes up, most of them are paying 50% of their commission or whatever they sell to whoever owns the whole thing. And it's about moving.
Sounds like quite culty, doesn't it?
It's very culty. It shares a huge amount of the cult. So actually, they will tell you. It doesn't matter which one you go and check out. I've been to see a number of them, in fact. But they all follow exactly the same process, and right. It is like a cult, and they'll say. You might find when you tell your friends and family about this, they disapprove. And you've got to understand that as you develop, as you learn more, they all use the same phrase, as you develop your education, then your world's going to become bigger. Now, that's true. Yeah. But the reason they're saying that is to not take advice or listen to your partner who's going, you sure we need to spend $3,000 for this weekend? Because I kind of think we could use that $3,000 elsewhere right now.
It's like pre-manipulation or something. It's like sort of, do you know what? It rings alarm bells to me because it's, I suppose the most obvious parallel to draw with that would be an abusive relationship, right? Like it would be a husband saying like, don't talk to your mum about this. Don't go to talk to your sister about it. She doesn't need to know, it's very similar. It's like your mum might, like when you go back and tell your wife that you're spending $20,000 on this course, she might raise her eyebrows and, leave you, but you just keep paying me.
It could indeed be an abusive woman to somebody else as well, just for the interests of balance. And there absolutely could be that sense of, don't tell somebody else outside this. And that's actually where a lot of people, multi-level marketing does a similar thing. There's a lot of multi-level marketing businesses and some of them are huge, and let's not name any of them. But there's this whole thing of when you tell people, they will raise their eyebrows to use your phrase, their aid. And it's dangerous because everybody I've ever spoken to who has actually invested in property, who has actually done it, myself included, we've nearly all made mistakes. The mistakes wouldn't have been avoided if we'd paid somebody several £1,000s. We might have got one or two extra strategy ideas, but for £3,000, £4,000, £5,000, I say to anybody, if you're serious about wanting to learn about property, here's the best thing you can go and do. Go and get a job in an estate agent. Yeah. Because they will pay you to look at property all day long. That's... but the thing is, the big things they trade on the star power, whoever the big individual is. Yeah, the individual you're talking about. They will trade on the fact there's 300 people there. They will trade on I'm a multi-millionaire. I never need work again. I was a millionaire at 17, 18, 20.
Yeah, or they'll say, like now joining us today to do a big speech, I guess they would boast about the fact that he's got like 500,000 followers on such and such, like, and it's all social proofing. So
having a big number of followers suggests that, if you look at Cialdini, a book called Influencer in the 60s or 70s, it's used over and over and over by marketeers. But one of the well-known, I think it's 6 or 7 principles in there. One of them is social proofing. Yeah. So the reason that social media is the like and the comment, the follow, the reason you and I make videos and at the end say, if you like this, please follow, please share, tell other people, is because we want to grow the numbers, but we want other people to know that this is okay. Yeah. You should listen to what we're saying.
Yeah, it's a big thing, isn't it? Especially in the social media world, to almost be like a clumsy metaphor to use perhaps, but like in the film 8 Mile, Eminem refers to his black friend as his like sort of ghetto pass. Like he's allowed into the hip hop battle club because his black friend will sort of vouch for him and say, no, it's cool. He's not a cop almost. And it's sort of like that. It's like you need, in growing a YouTube channel or a TikTok account or a podcast or a property investment seminar, you want people to be in a position where they're vouching for you to say that you're not full of shit kind of thing.
Yeah, and you see it all the time on those seminars. So to go back to your original question, and we sort of sideways slightly into property. For me, a lot of what is talked about in business or property or marketing or any of these things, which I have a bit of an interest and some exposure to many of those areas. A lot of it is quite basic, but it takes a skill that a lot of us don't really want to do anymore, which is a bit of effort, and it takes a bit of getting it wrong. Now, you and I are talking about stand-up comedy earlier, and you will know that every single stand-up comedian who's ever made it, who looks like they came from nowhere, always has spent nights and nights and nights and nights, sometimes years of nights and nights and nights, learning to be funny on demand. And
it goes back to that saying, I actually read about this when I was learning coding, but it's equally true of anything, really. It's like you see an expert, I see a bag of fucking mistakes. It's like this idea that you see someone who's just got, they just shine at what they do, but actually they've got, say, in a comedian's case, often like 10 years behind them of dying on their ass, tanking through the floor. Like people like, I remember when somebody was like, do you think Chris Rock could do his iconic routine, the one that he's most famous for, which I won't quote because I'll get into all kinds of trouble for it. But they were like, do you think he could do that now? Could he hone that routine? I was like, I don't think so, because the amount of time that it would take for someone to craft that and hone it and smooth out the edges, somebody would have filmed it. And it would take him dying on his ass and testing this and retesting. Anyway, I'm going off on a right tangent
but you know what Chris Rock says about being funny, though, right? Chris Rock, as mega famous as Chris Rock is, he says it takes him a year from writing a joke to it being reliably funny.
Yeah, I can believe that.
You know, what's the thing? The ninth Seinfeld. So Seinfeld, mega famous, still one of the most successful stand-up comedians and writers of all time, right?
Sure.
This guy who still makes 20 million a year from shows that they stopped filming 20 years ago. He's still making packets of money. Now, Seinfeld has said if he goes out with a new show, he said at most he gets about 3 minutes grace. So when he walks in front of a new audience with new content, he said, I've got 3 minutes where I can pretty much do anything because I'm Seinfeld and everybody knows me. He said, after that, I need to be funny just like everyone else.
Yeah.
Now, that's a sharp reminder for whether you want to get better at property or public speaking or being a stand-up comedian or marketing or making good TikTok videos or anything. And I think there's almost a lost attention to detail. And I think the great thing, I mean, the internet is, it can democratize our access to information and our ability to get famous, if that's our thing, or to access information. I mean, anybody who is below a certain age, I can't work out what that age is now. So the internet came into my life, 20 odd years ago, right? So I was late 20s, 30. And I remember even then thinking, this is amazing. But even now you can type in anything and there's your answer. And the internet has done that, which is amazing. But I think the downside of it is we want everything very fast.
Yeah.
It's personal skills we've got to learn.
It's also diluted the value of everything. Like, so back in the day, this is an example I often come back to, but like if you think of how big musicians were in the 80s and how big film stars were in like the 80s and 90s, well, any decade. And now you look at how much choice, like this, it's a basic supply and demand issue, right? Like, so you've got a huge amount of supply now. You've got Netflix, Amazon, you've got, name the streaming platform. You've got Spotify playlists constantly updated, unsigned artists on there as well as signed artists. You've got like just this deluge of product hitting you. So you never really truly value anything in the same way that your dad would or your granddad would, like when they were listening to Radio 1 and it was the choice out of like Radio 1 or like, I don't know, a pirate station that had the same like 8 songs playing every hour. You pick like your one favorite And then, like,
Absolutely.
so now we're in a situation where you'll never get another Beatles or another Michael Jackson or another David Bowie, because you could hear it.
Do you not think, however, that is Sheeran our David Bowie? Arguably, One Direction perhaps were our Beatles. They were, we don't want to think of it like that. But
I think you're being incredibly generous, Graham, and I love you for it. I think it's a great attribute to have, but I think drawing parallels between the Beatles and one. Oh, is anyone seriously going to be singing One Direction songs in like 10 years' time?
I don't know any One Direction songs actually. It's a friend of mine who argues that they were the modern Beatles, and I probably reacted the same way as you did actually when he told me. And I thought I can kind of see what he's saying in terms of the global fame and phenomenon, but in terms of the musicality of the songs, no, I think that's probably very true.
They're British and they were big in America, but yeah. I mean that's as far as I can't remember them.
They were big everywhere, right? They were huge. They were huge.
Okay.
They still are,
Okay,
the day. Look, the day they re-announce they're going to get together, because they're going to, it's going to be part of the plan.
Yeah.
It's going to be huge. It's going to be massive. Of course it is.
Will it, though? Because people said that about the Spice Girls. They were like, well, when they get back together, it's going to be Cool Britannia all over again. There's fucking half-empty arena sales and stuff. Like,
yeah, it was eventually. They made a lot of money for a little while, and so did Take That boys. They did very well, didn't they? Anyway, we're going well off.
Yes,
we're going well off here.
So let's just come back to buy to let, because some of my followers on TikTok and maybe on YouTube or Twitter might not know this, but I'm perhaps not as super far left as maybe some people who follow me think that I am. I sit sort of comfortably in the centre, I think. So in some senses, I get completely befuddled and perplexed at the state of UK government, and I tend to bash the Tories quite a lot, but I always feel like that's coming from a place of logic and common sense and a thirst for integrity in public office, but in other senses, other aspects of my life, I'm absolutely sort of firmly centre, right? So my girlfriend is a buy-to-let investor also. I'm a big believer in self-improvement, in investing time in yourself, making a change if you're in a position to. I think where I sort of get off the bus, where I could never imagine myself voting. I mean, never say never, right? But I could never imagine myself voting Conservative is when it becomes, it's a party sort of populated by largely silver spoon beneficiaries of nepotism, who then, when confronted with an urgency to help the most vulnerable in society, whether that's in social care or people on universal credit or state schools or hospitals, look the other way and then spaff money to donors instead. Like, that's what gets my go. And then when I rant about that stuff, people go like, oh, he's a fucking lefty, a super turbo socialist. But actually, it's like, no, that's just unfair. If you want to talk about sort of, self-improvement and that stuff, then I'm firmly in the centre. And as I say, like, my girlfriend is a buy-to-let investor also. And so I've sort of by proxy developed a bit of an interest in that market. And I hear some of the shit that she gets as a result of working in that arena. So with that very long prelude, I'm just curious, like, do you get a lot of shit for working in buy-to-let? Do you get a lot of abuse or trolls or...
I don't really talk about buy-to-let unless people ask or are interested. I didn't start doing buy-to-let on TikTok until people said, do you know anything about buy-to-let? Yeah, okay. So somebody said, if you had, I think the first video was something like, if you had £50,000, how would you invest in property?
Yeah.
So I said, well, I'd buy two £80,000 properties, £20,000 in each, and I'd use the £10,000 for the legals, the setup fees, and a bit of refurb, as in a pot of paint. It's not going to be a lot of refurb.
Sure.
So that, in other words, you get two £80,000 properties, £160,000 worth of property for £50,000. Now, if they both got to £100,000, you've now got £200,000 worth of property for 50 grand in. That's not bad. So that was it. It's a bit about leveraging and about how easy the property it is. What then follows is a range of, that's really interesting. Would you do this? What percentage you're paying? A lot of people love to go, and I don't know if they all live in the southeast, but they love to go straight to you're a fucking idiot, where you're buying property for 80 grand. What, a shed? So 2 summers ago, that led to an enormous range of videos of, where I live, the cheapest place is £250,000. So I then send them a video of me on Rightmove with about 2,000 properties, all at £80,000 or less.
Yeah.
Yeah, but some of those are in disgraceful state, and some of those are. Yeah, but that's a different argument. And I think the problem is, it goes back to what we were saying a minute ago, Aid. Some people want everything spoon-fed to them, and the world was never like that. So do I get a bit of hassle? Yeah, I do. It's inane. It's childlike. It's sometimes name-calling. It's sometimes really rude. So the classic one on TikTok is, you're a leech, you're a parasite, you're a problem. It's like, well, hang on, sorry, have we met?
Yeah.
I mean, buy me a drink first if you're going to go straight for the sexy stuff here. But there's a perception that it's okay to say to you can walk into.
I can't emphasize enough how cathartic it is to hear somebody else talk about the abuse that they get on TikTok. It's
very interesting because it's socially acceptable, it seems, in many circles to go, landlords are parasites, and with having no concept of what you're talking about, you can then go, oh yeah.
So let's peel the onion on this a little bit. So I'm coming at it from a left-leaning, centre-left perspective, but also one where my girlfriend has sort of schooled me on.
You sound like a class traitor to me, Aid.
Don't feed them. Don't feed them. But it's so my take on this is that there have always been landlords. So I appreciate that. That they do against, like, a lot of people would disagree with this, but I do feel like they do perform a societal function. I think there's a lot of people, for a variety of reasons, who move to towns and cities who don't actually want to buy property. They could be visiting lecturers, they could be they could be CEOs who are actually only over here on like a fixed term contract for like 3 years or something while they...
There's a need there, yeah?
Yeah. So now, admittedly, a lot of those people are probably not going to be renting one-bed flats in, let's say, Camberwell in London. So there is an argument to be made that when people go into an area of high density like that, where other people are desperate to get on the ladder, and there are, let's say, 20 flats in this complex up for sale, and then all 20 get purchased by investors, and nobody gets a fucking look in to get their foot on the ladder in that first property, that one-bed flat. They all go to invest, and then if they want to live there in that area that's a stone's throw to their job, then they're fucked. But now they're paying double the amount a month than they would have done had they bought it, and they'd be paying the mortgage. So do you, like, I understand the anger there. Can you sort of empathize with that also?
Well, the problem is there are multiple things here that are true, and they're all true at the same time. So there's no cognitive dissonance. This is all true, although all of this appears to contradict itself. So there will always be somebody who says exactly what you just explained, right? All of the property goes to the landlords. All right. First of all, that doesn't always happen, right? That's not always true. It's your perception that it's true. It might have happened once and it's stayed with you for the last 3 years, and it's a pub story you regurgitate. That's the first thing. So first of all, I don't think it always happens. Second of all, I think some areas do have that problem, and some areas are swarmed in on by landlords. But then we raise a bigger question. So is that irritating? Yeah, it sounds horrendous. So what do we do about it? Oh, well, landlords shouldn't be able to buy property. All right, but why? Because at the moment, at this time and this place, we generally speaking, although Boris and Boys have been trying to change this rapidly, we generally have an open market economy, and people can buy and do what they want to do. And that's generally a good thing. And the problem is, in certain areas or in certain buildings or certain high density areas, Camberwell, I think was your example, that people then go, oh, I don't get a look in. So that raises problems. So can we legislate about that? Should we legislate about that? I think that's less clear. I think the other thing is that we have, and I see this a lot with property, we have learned helplessness. So the most common conversation of learned helplessness I have is this. You've said £80,000 property. Yeah. The average property price in the UK is £250,000. The average wage for a graduate starting is 22. How is that fair? Well, I will tell you. You're looking at the average UK wage, but you're on not an average. Sorry, start again. You're looking at the average UK property price of, let's say, 250.
Yeah.
You are looking at a starting wage. A starting wage can't look at the average property price. That's too expensive.
Yeah.
And they then come back and say, but I've got to move away from my friends and my family. Yes. And you always had to. Back in the glorious 80s, when property was £5.50 and we all earned 50p a week, I'm being slightly cynical here.
Sure.
It was pretty difficult then. Now, a different sort of difficult, but difficult for a whole bunch of reasons. So, yeah, I don't think it's perfect at the moment, but I also don't think it's particularly easy to know how we legislate it. And, oh, well, ban landlords is an inane, stupid and childlike argument. Oh, well, people should only be able to have one property each. Why? That only suits you at the moment because you don't have one.
Yeah, I do. So to some extent, I actually buy into that idea. I think there should be a limit to, but then, right. So here's the thing. This is where my logic and my sort of idealism kind of conflict, right? So logically, I think, right, okay, landlords in the UK, you should have a maximum of, I think, 4 residential properties. I'm sort of pulling that figure out of my arse, right? 4 residential, right? What they can be 1-bed flats, they can be 3-bed houses, they can be in the north or the south in Scotland, whatever. Fine. But then I start thinking, hang on, because my girlfriend works in this arena, I am already privy to the information that actually, against probably most people's expectations, most landlords in the UK actually own like 1, maybe 2 properties. So then it becomes a question of like, well, look, if the problem that you're trying to solve is the housing crisis and getting people firstly on that ladder, you're not going to fucking solve it by wasting a load of legislative energy and political capital trying to put something like that in, because it's not going to change anything, right?
That won't stop them, however. They love to legislate. The last 5 years, George Osborne started it. Another Conservative Chancellor started this war on landlords. It's become an ideological war. Shelter, or Shouter, as we all call them, have become part of it. And the whole TikTok landscape, bad landlords. So there's more landlord legislation on the way now. It's
crazy, though, isn't it? Because it's like, so I could imagine them wasting that. I mean, here I am sort of chastising them for wasting the political capital on it, but I could totally imagine them doing it because it's a Tory government, and I imagine that a lot of Tories own property or have friends or wives or husbands who have invested in property, and they would then be in a really comfortable position to say, look, we're going to put this thing in, but don't worry, because it, you know, secretly we all know that most of us only own like 1 or 2 properties, so it's fine, like it won't actually impact them, but it'll make us look good in the Guardian.
But then you run another problem because you know, most people's objection to this is, and again, I'll share an opinion with you, right? Most people's objection to landlords is couched in terms of it's not fair, it's not the right thing to do, I would never do it, and people just need to get on the ladder. That's most people's the way their objections are couched. The uncomfortable reality for many of us is that many people's objection to landlords is intensely personal and based purely on envy. You've got something and are doing something that I perceive makes you money for no effort whatsoever, and that's not fair. Now, you can see exactly the same thing in work from home versus going into a workplace. In fact, I think you've done it in one of your videos.
We can talk about that in a sec.
But it's the same envy idea. You've got something I haven't. So what's the solution? Well, the solution for some people is you shouldn't have it because I can't get it. Well, you can. You just need to do your life differently. And that's an uncomfortable, and that's going to sound, you know, brutally gammon conservative. But actually, from an apolitical stance, if you want to be more clever or more switched on or make more money or be thinner or have a more attractive partner or be able to cycle better or be funny or a comedian, it's exactly what you said earlier on, you're going to have to make some changes in your life. And it's going to be really horribly hard. That's just the reality of it.
I think you're right. I think for a lot of people, I think it comes from not necessarily a place of envy purely. I think it comes from a place of immense frustration in that they are looking at property. They're trying to find a place to live, which is just a fundamental need, right? Like it's not something you can dip in and dip out of. which is one of the reasons why so many people go into property, right? Because there's always going to be a market for a roof over people's heads.
Correct.
But they are approaching this problem at a time where we've got booming landlordism, if that's even a word, and also a time
we haven't. Landlordism is waning because of the last 5 years. The legislation, the rules, the tax changes. Councils are so greedy; they're all piling in what they want to get out of it. This whole social networking, this social fabric now. It's okay to be really horrendous to landlords. A load of landlords are going, do you know what? Sod this. It's
really.
Yes, it's and I actually made a video on this. It's like, be careful what you wish for.
Yeah.
You don't want landlords to think this through. You don't want landlords. You go on Shelter and you moan to them. And you talk to your MP and you come on TikTok and you shoot your mouth off, and all this is happening. And meanwhile, all the tax rules and the councils are getting on it with their hands open. We want a bit more money, please. Yeah. And increasingly, landlords have gone, do you know what? I just don't need the hassle anymore. Or I'm going to switch to Airbnb, or I'm going to sell this. I'm going to cash out. And what you've now got is reduced numbers of landlords. And because you've got reduced numbers of landlords, some of those will go to other landlords' properties, but some of them will go to people to live there. Now, what do you think happens then? It means you've got less rentable property. Well, let's go to a classic. It's supply and demand. There's less property to rent. So guess what? The prices go up.
So,
and I hate to say to those people, but you did that.
Yeah. So I understand that, but like the sort of, I guess the point I was going to get to was that if you've got let's say a culture of landlords or landlordism until now, you say that it's gone down. Or that people are sort of bailing out of it. I'd be interested to see what they're going into. Are they jumping into crypto? They're like, fuck this.
I think Airbnb's been a big one. I mean, it's a colleague of mine I've known for a long time, and he started moving into Airbnb, and as he's moved into Airbnb, and financially that's considerably better. And of course, we've got less people flying or moving or traveling abroad because the airports are so fucked. Yeah. But what he's found, of course, is that his local council's going, we want a license for that. And I understand why that's got to happen. I've got some sympathy for some of that.
But it's also to do with the absence of things like 100% mortgages. So like we were talking about like back in the 80s a second ago, right? You're right. Like it's never been super easy to get on the ladder, right? You've always had to either save up a deposit or take your risk with 100% mortgage, and for a long time they've failed to build an adequate number of houses. So that's not new. But what is new is that we're now sort of, if you imagine a crescendo of failure of house building, we're now at this sort of peak where the cost of a house is what, like, you could probably quote the figures back to me, but it's something ridiculous. Like the average UK house, like to buy a house, is something like 10 or 11 times the average UK salary, right? But you can only borrow up to like 4.5, 5 times your salary.
You can borrow a bit more than that, and I think it's about 9.5 times. But
is it?
I think those are the figures. But there are usually other deals you can find. But it's out
of reach, right?
Yeah,
for a lot of people, unless there's family money, and most people out there don't have family money.
No.
And the decision makers that decide on this stuff, or that decide what legislation gets put into the Queen's speech that year, or whatever, do have family money, and so there's this expectation that they're out of touch, or there's this attitude that they're out of touch, and that nothing's changing, nothing's improving. And because the traditional mechanism that they would have would be to just roll the dice on 100% mortgage, fuck it, I'm in the southeast, this is how my mum got on the ladder. She got 100% mortgage, bought the cheapest 3-bed house on the shittiest council estate in Maidenhead, and because you will know this, that the general trend, even if there is a recession, is that the value of property tends to go up. It will recover. She made money, and
over time it will generally double every 10 years.
Yeah. So
they used to say every 7 years, but if you work on your property doubling in value every 10 years, now it's a bit like a fruit machine. So it's not like every 10 years your property will be double.
Yeah.
It's a lot more like over 500 years. If you work it out, it's doubled every 10 years. That's generally a bit of a guideline people use.
But because now there's insufficient stock of new houses, and because you can't get 100% mortgage,
right,
and because the legislators don't come from the same socioeconomic background as people like, I was about to say people like me, but I am on the ladder, so I'm probably out the window on this one. There is this feeling of frustration, and then I think when you inject landlords into the mix, and these people look at their pay slips and they're like, I earned, let's say, £2,000 last month, and fucking half of it went on a flat that I could have saved half of that money if I just bought it. Like, what am I paying for? So I totally understand the anger out there, but I also get where you're coming from, and indeed where my girlfriend comes from, where they're like, landlords provide a function, not everyone can buy, some people do want to rent, but I don't know. I don't know what the solution is to it. Like, what do you think we should do?
You can go back to 1979-80 with Margaret Thatcher and the right to buy. And of course, there are still some rabid lefties who go, bloody Thatcher, right to buy. Well, hang on, yeah, that's 50 years ago, 40 years ago. And to be honest, you did have 12 years in the middle where you might have reversed that. If you go back to World War II, this country, no matter what brand of politics you favour, what side of the house you sit, this country's never built enough properties. So right now, this country needs to build about 300,000 properties a year, just to keep up with demand.
Yeah,
right? 300,000 a year. Well, I think in something like 2007, 2008. So that would have been Blair. I think they hit like 220, and that was the closest we've ever got in 100 years or 80 years. Right, one year in the middle of Blair. And of course, you then get into it if you want to talk politics. So, okay, Thatcher did the right to buy. A lot of people like the right to buy. I think it fundamentally changed the UK, changed the way we work. But none of them at the time thought, well, hang on, this is going to cause some problems later on because we still need social housing. And the reality is, the uncomfortable reality, again, for no matter what political thing you're interested in, Thatcher's team never came up with a solution. Mayor John Major was in for 6-7 years. He never came up with a solution. Blair and Brown, 12 years, never came up with a solution. And we're now back on the right, and 12 years, no one's come up with a solution. No one has fixed it. And is that because they've come from a silver spoon background? It's possible. I don't think that's the reason. I do think at the moment the current Conservative government, I think they have a massive issue with perception and intention, and I think their perception is shocking. I don't think they have nailed it at all, and I think it's very, very hard, certainly if you come from the sort of the left of politics, to see them as anything other than the kinds of things they get called. I think it's really hard for any of them to argue anything better. And I think the worst thing is they look so clueless in any kind of interview, and you're thinking, well, you've been briefed, right? You've got like a box of stuff with even the questions they're likely to ask you. Why aren't you? Yeah, I think I'm coming across, whether or not you agree with me or disagree with me, I think I'm coming across as reasonably well informed on this conversation so far.
Sure.
Why aren't I seeing that in people who are professional talkers?
Well, I suppose, again, sort of speaking, coming from a left perspective, my sense is that these are people who have, not all of them, but certainly with your Boris Johnsons, your Jacob Rees-Moggs, people who have come up through that silver spoon route, they have failed upwards. They've never really been disciplined or had to deal with the output of failure. They've been rewarded for it, conversely. And so for them to then sit and actually study and brief and be across their brief for something and to feel the repercussions of that is just something for the little people. You know, that's how it feels. I see how poorly they perform and I just go, oh my fucking Christ. Like, these are the people that are leading us, really? Is this the best we can do?
Yeah, and I think, you know, I think you can look back, depending on your age and interest in politics, you can look back and you can see big sections of, oh my goodness, that was bad. And it always fascinates me, I mean, if I can kind of cross the floor briefly, it always fascinates me when you see like people who are very proudly left, who will come in and take take some displeasure at me talking about property or talking about money or something, or first of all they'll go, "Yo, try to sell a course." Well, no, I'm not actually, but never mind. And then I'll start off with, well, there's this that's wrong, and there's this that's wrong, and something else. You kind of go, well, okay, what's your alternative? Well, Jeremy Corbyn. Jeremy Corbyn was the alternative. Yeah, but they didn't vote him in, did they? And then it's like there's always a reason why. Well, yeah, it was agitators. It was hidden elite. It was okay. Well, why don't you take a leaf out of Tony Blair, because Tony Blair was a vote machine. He won 3 in a row. Even by his third one, he absolutely smashed the Conservatives. And then the response is always, "Oh yeah, but he's not a proper Labour guy." Well, maybe you need not a proper Labour guy if you want to have another chance then, because he smashed it.
Well, that's the argument with Starmerism, for want of a better word, isn't it? It's like, so I always, whenever people criticise Starmer or accuse me of being some sort of Starmer fanboy, I'm always like, no, don't get it twisted. I don't think he's Jesus. I certainly don't worship him in the way that some people worshipped Corbyn. I'm not into hero worship, frankly, when it's politics, unless it's Emily Thornberry, who is fucking amazing. But when it comes to Starmer, I'm like, no, like, the idea is I will support him because he's leader of the opposition. Let's get him into power. And then once you're in power, once you're actually in a position to affect change, then you form lobby groups in the way that, let's say, the ERG have in the Conservative Party. You lobby for the change that you actually want to see. And maybe he won't do the thing that you want him to do, but you've got fucking an infinitely greater chance of having that conversation and having that form some sort of bill that then gets discussed and debated than just sitting here on the sidelines and fucking complaining about shit that ended like 2 years ago or 3 years ago. Grow the fuck up. So it's like there's a real element of frustration there where it's like,
I can see that.
It's I've got to, maybe I should, I'll have to watch my tone here a little bit, Graham, because I'm going to get myself in trouble again. But
with whom?
Well, this is it. Like, this is one of my bugbears. Is on the right, people tend to sort of coalesce and support whoever the prime minister or leader of the Conservative Party is at that moment. On the left, the vote gets split between sort of Puritans and realists, in my view.
I think there's certainly a truth of kind of not proper Labour. Okay, not if proper Labour is what I think you're identifying proper Labour as, it's possible, and I mean this very, very gently, it's possible the country has changed since proper Labour was first around, and those glory days of what you consider to be proper Labour, I'm not totally sure that's representative of the country anymore. Not totally clear that's what actually people want or need right now.
Do you know what's fascinating though, Graham? Is like, so I understand why they would look at somebody like Starmer, Thornberry, Cooper and say, like, that's not proper Labour. They are Tory light. They're in nice suits. They're cosy with business. I want a working class northern lad who knows what it's like. That, I get that. But what I don't understand is why those same people then vote Tory and go like, yeah, I don't like Starmer. He's not real Labour, but I will vote for this like narcissistic, sociopathic, 180,000 person killing, like corrupt, incompetent, cheated, like oh my god, it's like, why would you go for? Is it sort of a better the devil you know thing? Like, well, at least this guy we know he's an asshole,
I don't know. I mean, I got the sense you're moving into your stand-up, so I was just watching. Was there a question there?
Yeah. I'm just rhetorically asking / ranting. Yeah,
you're venting. You feeling any better?
Not really. No, never. Let's talk about work from home, because this is something that we do sort of meet midway on. So I'll sort of rehash.
I think we largely agree on this one, actually.
Yeah, I think so too. I'm going to rehash my sort of thoughts on it, and then I'll pass over to you, and you can sort of elaborate or add any caveats onto it if you like. But my kind of take on this, I'm somewhat puzzled by the government's push to get people out of their homes and back to the office commuting in the middle of a cost of living crisis.
Yeah.
So people like me have made the adjustment to work from home because we were told to.
Yeah.
There is a small uptick in the sense that we're no longer spending £400 a month on rail fare.
Yeah.
I'm very grateful for that. I spend time with my kids now.
Yeah. What's not to like?
Yeah, right. You spend more time with your family. You're saving a bit of money. I think what kind of just baffles me is this idea that it's like, right, it's bad for the economy though. I'm like, well, no, it's not. I'm still spending the money locally. So the money I would have spent in Pret in Moorgate.
The difficulty we have, and actually I can see, and you won't hear me say this very often, I suspect we'll never hear you say it, I can see some good intention from Rees-Mogg here, all right? I can see some good intention.
Sweet Jesus, Graham.
You want a conversation or not?
Yeah.
But I think he's gone about it horrendously badly. So here's the thing. I spent 24 years saying you can't do my kind of work online. So for 24 years, I went all over Europe, UK, Indonesia, East and West Coast America. It was lovely. I loved it. Could not get enough of it. It's fantastic. And then the pandemic hit and I had 2 months of no revenue, at which point I rapidly rethought my options and thought, yeah, I'm going to buy a green screen and set up everything and do it from here. And as it turns out, not only can you do my job from home, but I considerably prefer it. Not just for my own personal reasons, but I think I now do a better job. I think my clients get a better service. They get a much cheaper service because they don't have to pay me to travel up and down the country or go abroad. They don't have to pay for hotels. They've absolutely cut their costs. I sell them short pockets of time rather than whole days. Their delegates don't have to come and work with me for a whole day. They can drop in for 2 hours, but my revenue stays the same or even slightly higher. So in other words, it's all the business case is up. The learning case, how clients can work, is up.
Sure.
My personal life, I don't have to go on trains all the time. I stay in hotels all the time. Every business person who stays in hotels tell you it's pretty boring. It's fucking amazing. I love staying in hotels, but it's nicer staying at home, right?
Yeah.
So it's all up. Now, what happens during this period is that you and everybody else suddenly goes, I like this. I hate commuting. I never had to commute, right? I hate commuting. Oh my God, I'm saving £400 a month. Or I can see my children. I've got clients in major corporations who in the early months were going, this is great. I can get up, I can walk the dog, I can get back, I can take my daughter to school, I can log in, I can drop into Teams or Zoom or Skype even meetings with people. Don't have to find.
It's important to note here as well that none of the, so we're talking about our own experiences, right? But this is not just anecdotal. This is studies based also. It's like backed up by.
It's beyond that. I mean, all over LinkedIn. I've done the questions on TikTok, and it's anecdotal, but the numbers are absolutely. It's not like a 52-48% split. It's a fairly famous split, which was still contested, but it's massive, 60-75% going, oh no, I want to work from home. Now, the interesting thing is,
sorry to interject, it's not just like that they want to work from home, it's that people rated their mental health better,
listen,
they're more productive, like it's everything.
And before, in my world, before the pandemic, the number of times I'd have a meeting with somebody and I'd say, how are you, whatever. They go, oh, I've just been working from home. It's amazing. It's so much more done, right? No one has ever said, I work from home. It's a bit of a pain. Now, let's just put a quick caveat in. Sometimes younger people, perhaps, who have to house share or flat share, it's more difficult. If you're sharing with somebody else and you're both trying to work from home, I completely get that's a problem. But one of my colleagues said, we don't talk about work from home, we talk about work from anywhere. And work from anywhere is this. You don't have to work from home if you don't want to or can't. You can work from the park or a quiet Costa, or you can go to a business centre. He said, but failing all of those, the office remains open.
Yeah.
But he said the one thing you can't do is complain you're being made to come in, nor can you complain you're being made to stay at home. He said neither of those are true. You come in and go home. And I thought that guy nailed it.
Yeah.
Now, on the backdrop of all of that, our worlds have now irretrievably changed. We can't, as a population, buy into the idea of all going back into town to work, to do whatever we can. Now, you made a point. What if it's not fair that you've got to go to work because that's where your work is based and I can just work from home? Well, you need to change your job if you don't like that.
Yeah.
The solution to you not being happy is not making me unhappy too. So back to Rees-Mogg. Rees-Mogg's idea was sound. He's looking at the government being accused of wasting money left, right and centre, which they have been doing. So what he's done is he's thought, we've got all these big buildings which cost us God knows how much. I mean, that property in that prime London property, I have no concept what it's going to cost. Huge.
How much could you buy to let that out for? I mean,
well, but the problem he's got is if he said nothing, we're going to kick him for that, because it is, what the hell are all these people doing at home all day, right? So he's gone in and said, right, we need to get you all into work. Now, that's a stupid solution. That was the wrong solution to the problem. And the problem really is bigger than, do we get people into the offices? The problem really is, can we turn them into big flats for people? That's not even the solution either. We've got to fundamentally rethink city centres, because we don't need as many shops as we've had. But we can't just turn them into properties, because you might recall from the early 60s when they're rebuilding after World War II, all these flats, everyone's going, this is the future homes. But of course, by the 70s and 80s, we just got this vandalism, we got drug dealing, because they're all, there's these horrible isolated places. We need to redesign villages. So city centres need to become, you take that block there and you put some really nice expensive housing in, and you put some mid-range housing in, and you put supported social housing in, and you put in some cafes and some restaurants, and you need youth centres for kids to go and do whatever kids do these days, and you need a drama centre, you need somewhere you can go skating, you need a place for old folk to go and work together, you need a gym, you need somewhere you can go and do graffiti on the walls.
Yeah, so it's sort of like re-strategizing the space that you've got.
Re-strategize the entire place. So, and then you can go to the coffee shop next door and you build all this thing. Now, if you did that, then you have a chance of reworking this property. But at the moment, they're all doing it piecemeal. Let's get everyone back to the offices. Terrible idea. Why? So Costa or somebody can survive? It's like arguing we shouldn't invent the car 100 years ago, because what about all these blacksmiths that do horseshoes? It's the wrong argument. It's the wrong solution to a genuine problem.
Yeah, and it's also... It smacks of this sort of this idea that you've got these big commercial property owners in the city centres who are pushing, like, I don't know if they're donors or not, but it would not surprise me at all if the same people who own all of these properties in the city, I think Richard Tice is one of them, he is a commercial property owner who has been pushing people to go back to the office. There's a funny clip of him, I think last year, where he was like, people are just being selfish. It's like, mate, come on, like, just fucking sell your property to some sort of developer.
That's a really compelling story, of course, that Rees-Mogg has got, property portfolio in central London, or his rich donor mates who own the property. It may or may not be true. And well,
Dominic Cummings said the other day in a tweet that the reason that they're pushing for work from home, and it's that, let's be clear that, God, I sound like a politician, when they say, like, let's be clear. I'm
clear. I was very
clear about this. Yeah, but he said, like, one of the reasons that they are really pushing for work from home, and it is not just the civil service buildings or civil servant desks within government buildings that they're pushing on this. You see it on the front page of the Mail, where they're saying that the Bank of England staff, no wonder that there's big inflation, because all the Bank of England staff are all working from home, blah, blah, blah. So it's any opportunity they can, whether it's the Mail or Nick Ferrari on LBC, they are bashing the idea of work from home. You should be getting back to the office. It's no good you sitting at home in your pajamas, etc., etc.
But there is a counter argument to this, which is DVLA famously has really struggled to move to work from home. I suspect a lot of, or certainly some, big civil servant organisations have struggled to do that. Now, there's no real reason they struggle to do that, other than perhaps organisation, other than how are we going to make this work. But most corporate organisations have made it work. Yeah. So I think we're in a mid to long term problem. I don't think it's a quick fix, but the fix is not everyone's got to go back to work. That's a stupid idea.
It's it's a simplistic, quick fire. I was going to say easy solution, but it's not an easy solution, because it's just set up to fail. What it says to me is that these are people in positions of power and influence who really don't understand fundamentally how people's jobs have changed, and they can absolutely probably, I say can absolutely probably, they they probably can force the civil service in some capacity to go back to the office. But in terms of the private sector, the guys that, like my day job, people that I would get phone calls from, like recruiters, like nobody is talking about fucking 9 to 5 commuting in. Everyone is talking about like
and the reality,
hybrid
reality
roles. And
I've just noticed we've clicked past 8:30, and I'm so sorry. I'm going to have to call this in a minute.
oh sure, yeah, no, I don't want to keep you.
Sorry. I've just literally noticed. I think the final thought for me on that is we're not all going back to the workplace, and I don't think they can make people go back, because what we're seeing in recruitment is people are now saying, okay, so what's the salary? What's the deal? What's the package?
Yeah.
Oh, I have to come in every week. Nah, you're right. And already people that are saying it's 2 day a week in the office are already struggling to recruit, as well as those that say work from anywhere.
Yeah. Well, the market rate for going into the office, what will happen is like the market rate that it was a year ago or 2 years ago will become the actual rate. And then if you want me to come into the office on top of that, well, now you got to pay me an extra like 10k or 20k or something.
Listen, I've got to bring this to a close. I'm so sorry.
Cool. I'll let you go. Thank you so much for joining me tonight, Graham Davids.
Thank you. It's been brilliant. Lovely talking to you, Abe. Cheers.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Take it easy. Bye-bye.
That was Graham Davids. Ladies and gents, once again, thank you so much for joining me for A. Thompson and Other Disappointments. A bit of an abrupt ending there by Graham, but do you know what? I will forgive him because he's such a charming, lovely guy. If you do want to support the podcast, please do jump onto Patreon. There's 3 tiers on there that you can choose from. I think the cheapest is £2, so not much at all. All I would say is that if you're not in a position to support the podcast, it's totally fine. I understand that. It is a weird time. All I would ask in return is that if you've listened to a couple of the episodes and you've enjoyed them, then please do send a link on to one of your friends who you think might also enjoy the podcast and indeed maybe the blogs, all of which are available on funk27.co.uk. Until next time, guys, which will be next Wednesday, actually. I do a show, a solo show on Wednesday where I talk about life, love, the universe, whatever's in the news. Usually taking the piss out of America in some. I don't know why that's become my niche for the solo shows, but that's it. That's my thing. And then Friday night I usually have a guest on for the live stream at 7:30. Everything goes out on Patreon first, and then a couple of days later it goes out onto Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thank you so much for tuning in. I will be back next week. Take care of yourselves and each other. God, I say.